The moment the cake hit the floor, every conversation in the ballroom died, not with a scream, but with that sharp, chilling silence that spreads when people witness something they know is wrong but aren't brave enough to stop. Elena Whitford stood over the fallen plate like she'd just performed a minor miracle instead of a public humiliation, her manicured fingers still poised midair, her smirk bright enough to compete with the chandelier above her. And Jordan Ellis, calm, still, perfectly composed, looked at her with the kind of quiet that makes the air feel heavier, like something was being measured, weighed, and silently judged. What the crowd didn't know not yet was that this wasn't just petty cruelty from a bored heiress. This was the opening crack in a $4 billion empire moments away from collapsing under its own arrogance. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jordan. The insult hadn't been subtle. Elena made sure of that. "Honey, this table is for actual stakeholders," she'd said loudly enough for the servers to flinch. "But don't worry, you can stand nearby. Maybe you'll learn something." Then, a flick of her wrist, a sharp laugh, frosting smeared like graffiti across the rim of the plate before she let it slip from her hand as if gravity itself obeyed her. Jordan didn't bend to pick it up. She didn't apologize. She didn't shrink. She simply straightened her posture, the soft fabric of her black dress catching the light in a way that made her look less like a guest and more like a blade, quiet, honed, dangerous. Years of remembering tried to push against her calm, a restaurant in Atlanta when she was 22, a luxury store in New York at 28, a venture capital meeting in San Francisco at 35. Different rooms, same tone. Same assumption. Same dismissal. But the difference tonight was simple, this room was standing on money she controlled. "Are you going to say something?" Elena taunted, leaning in with a confidence built on lineage, not competence. "Or is this the part where you pretend you didn't hear me?" Jordan finally turned her head, just enough for the movement to ripple across the cluster of onlookers. "I heard you," she said, voice smooth, steady. "And I'm giving you a chance to walk away from what you just started." Elena scoffed, tossing her hair back like a weaponized gesture. "You don't get to issue warnings here. You're lucky we even let you in." A board member standing nearby winced. Someone else whispered, "Oh God," but Jordan didn't blink. Her thumb brushed her phone, a single silence signal, a quiet ignition of consequences already set in motion. "You really should have checked who your family is negotiating with," she said softly, not a threat, not a plea, but a fact dressed in velvet. Elena laughed again, too loud, too sure. "Trust me, sweetheart. If you were anyone important, I'd know." And that was the exact moment, the precise second, the ballroom shifted, because Jordan Ellis smiled. Slowly. Calmly. The kind of smile that says the storm is already here, and you were too blind to see the clouds forming above your own head. Jordan's smile did not fade as the ballroom struggled to settle back into its own shimmering elegance, because something in the air had shifted, something small but undeniable, like the faint hum before a power surge. Elena Whitford stood confident in her ignorance, adjusting her diamond bracelet as if the glitter could shield her from consequences she had just summoned with her own hands. The nearby board members exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared interfere. Their silence was the same silence Jordan had heard for decades, the silence that always allowed insults to bloom unchecked in expensive rooms. Jordan lifted her phone slightly, not enough to draw attention, but enough for a single confirmation vibration to pulse against her palm. Her assistant, Mariah Evans, saw everything from her monitoring station on the mezzanine above the ballroom. She did not need an explanation. She had already begun preparing the documents that could freeze or release billions. She whispered into her headset, "Protocol 7 is ready." Down below, Elena let out a laugh that bounced off glass and marble. "You are seriously still here? I am impressed. Most people would have run out crying by now." She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and sweet, the kind of scent that pretended to be gentle. "Let me guess. You want to act calm so you do not embarrass yourself further in front of the real investors." A waiter carrying champagne halted mid-stride, unsure whether to move or vanish. A soft ripple of tension traveled through the nearby guests, but still no one stepped in. Jordan's voice was quiet, steady, anchored. "I do not need to act calm," she said. "I am calm." Elena scoffed, flipping a strand of hair with a dismissive gesture. "Yes, well, you people have to be. It is the only way you blend in." That sentence did not fall. It detonated. Several guests inhaled sharply. A senator's husband took a half step forward, then hesitated. He looked around and saw no one else moving, so he retreated into the safety of stillness. A young woman standing near the auction table pressed her hand over her mouth. Jordan took a breath, and for a moment the room blurred into memory. She saw herself at 29, sitting in a bank lobby while a manager interrogated her about her own account. She saw herself at 35, stepping into a hotel that accidentally lost her reservation. She saw every moment she had been told she did not belong, and she felt the familiar ache that always preceded clarity. Then she opened her eyes and saw Elena again. "You are very confident tonight," Jordan said softly, "but confidence without knowledge is just noise." Elena laughed again, harsher this time, because something in Jordan's tone unsettled her in a way she could not name. "You seriously think you can intimidate me? I am a Whitford. My family funded this entire event. My father is literally upstairs with the acquisition team right now." Jordan nodded once. "I know." The heiress blinked. "What is that supposed to mean?" Jordan raised her phone to her ear. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "Mariah, please move to phase 2. Mariah's reply was immediate. "Confirmed. The acquisition team has been notified." A visible shiver ran through the nearby board members. One leaned toward another and whispered, "She would not do it here, would she?" The other responded, "She absolutely would." Elena heard it. She finally turned pale. Jordan lowered her phone, her gaze steady and unmovable. "You should have checked who your family was negotiating with," she said. "Because you just turned a $4 billion deal into a countdown." The chandelier above them flickered as if reacting to the words themselves. And for the first time all evening, the heiress had nothing to say. For a long moment after Jordan's words sank into the marble-lit air, the ballroom felt like it was holding its breath. Even the string quartet paused mid-measure as if the instruments themselves understood that the night had veered into dangerous territory. Elena Whitford's confidence fractured in real time, her posture stiffened, her lips twitched, and a flicker of uncertainty passed behind her eyes like a shadow darting through light. She attempted a shaky laugh, but it came out thin, almost brittle, a sound that betrayed the entitlement she had wrapped herself in like armor moments before. "You are bluffing," she said, pointing an accusing finger at Jordan, her voice cracking at the edges. "You are trying to intimidate me in front of my guests. This is pathetic." But Jordan did not move. She stood anchored to the polished floor, her calm presence unnerving enough that several guests instinctively stepped back, forming a widening circle around the two women. The quiet murmurs swelling from the edges of the room carried a new tone now, not gossip, not curiosity, but the early tremors of realization. People were beginning to understand that the situation was no longer social drama, it was corporate consequence. A middle-aged investor near the silent auction table whispered to his wife, she said, "Countdown. That means this is real." His wife nodded, her gaze locked on Jordan as though witnessing the unraveling of an old myth about who truly held power in rooms like this. Suddenly, a security officer in a navy suit stepped forward, summoned by a frantic gesture from one of the Whitford staff. His name tag read Officer Dalton, and his jaw was set with the kind of rigid determination that came from following orders rather than understanding circumstances. "Ma'am," he said to Jordan, placing a firm hand near his belt as if preparing for escalation, "I am going to need you to step away from Miss Whitford. You are disrupting the event." The guest stiffened, even the air felt sharper as eyes shifted from him to Jordan. Elena seized the opportunity, regaining a sliver of her earlier arrogance. "Yes," she snapped, "escort her out. Right now. This woman is causing a scene and threatening my family's business." Officer Dalton nodded and stepped closer, reaching out with a rehearsed authority that assumed compliance. But Jordan did not step back. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her voice steady and quiet enough to make the moment feels surgical. "Officer," she said, "before you put your hands on me, I need you to check with your supervisor. I believe your chain of command just changed." The officer hesitated, confusion flashing across his face, but Elena barked, "Do your job. She is nobody. Remove her." Before he could react, a voice rang through the ballroom from the mezzanine. "Officer Dalton, stand down. Immediately." Every head turned upward. It was Mariah Evans, authoritative and composed, with a tablet in her hand displaying corporate credentials that glowed blue and gold under the lights. "Miss Ellis is not a disruptor," she announced, her voice clear enough to slice through the rising tension. "She is the principal negotiator and controlling party of the acquisition your employer is finalizing this evening." Gasps rippled across the ballroom like shockwaves, Elena's face drained of color, and the officer instinctively withdrew his hand, his posture shifting from dominance to caution in a single breath. Mariah continued, "Furthermore, Phase 2 has been executed. All documentation regarding the Whitford proposal is currently under board review, and internal audit teams have been notified." The murmurs grew louder, fear skirted the edges of Elena's expression as she stammered, "No, that is not possible. You cannot do that. You do not have that authority." Jordan finally stepped toward her, the air tightening around the movement. "I do not need permission," she said. "I only needed a reason. And you gave me a very public one." A tremor of panic crossed Elena's features as the room bore witness to the exact moment she recognized her own downfall. The ballroom did not simply fall silent, it tightened, as if every chandelier crystal, every polished wineglass, every breath drawn by every guest became part of a single, stretched thread that could snap at any second. Elena Whitford stood frozen in the center of it all, no longer the untouchable heiress but a woman rapidly running out of explanations and allies. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a thin, trembling inhale came out, the kind that revealed fear far more than she intended. Officer Dalton took one subtle step back, his authority dissolving as the weight of Mariah's announcement rippled through the room. Guests who had previously tried to look uninterested were now fully fixated on Jordan Ellis, their expressions shifting from unease to awe as understanding dawned. "A man near." The orchestra whispered, "She is the principal? She is the one controlling the deal?" His companion nodded slowly, her voice nearly a whisper. "That means she has the power to shut the Whitfords down completely." For the first time, the panic in Elena's eyes broke through her trained composure. "This is a misunderstanding," she said quietly, then louder, "Everyone is overreacting. She is making it sound bigger than it is." But her voice cracked again, betraying the truth, even she knew the situation had spun far beyond her control. Jordan remained still, centered in the storm, her presence radiating something that felt heavier than authority. It felt like inevitability. She looked at Elena with an expression that was not cruel, not triumphant, but profoundly tired, the kind of tiredness shaped by decades of being underestimated, dismissed, and disrespected by rooms just like this one. "You called me nobody," Jordan said softly, "in a room funded by my signature." A collective shiver surged through the ballroom. Even the quartet lowered their instruments entirely now, not daring to resume. Jordan continued, her voice unwavering. "You told a security officer to remove me, even though this event exists because of the work I built. You used my presence as the target for your arrogance, and now you believe this is simply overreaction." She took one step closer, and the energy in the ballroom condensed around her. "It is not." Elena's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. She turned desperately toward the board members clustered near the champagne fountain. "You all know me," she pleaded. "You know my family. You know we have been partners for years. Tell her this is ridiculous. Tell her this is not how business works." But the board members avoided her gaze, their eyes remained locked on Jordan. One of them, Edward Hanley, cleared his throat and murmured, "Miss Whitford, the matter is out of our hands. If Miss Ellis has initiated internal review, then the board is legally obligated to comply." Elena's composure shattered. "You cannot be serious," she said, her voice rising in panic. "You cannot let her do this to me." Jordan responded with a calmness that felt almost surgical. "I am not doing this to you. You did this to yourself.
All I have done is give your actions their appropriate consequences. Somewhere behind them, a guest accidentally dropped a fork, and the sharp metallic clang echoed like a gavel striking.
Mariah approached from the mezzanine, tablet in hand.
Phase 3 is prepared, she announced. Awaiting your authorization. A tremor ran through the crowd.
Elena stepped back, shaking her head repeatedly, desperately searching for someone to intervene. Please, she whispered to no one in particular, somebody stop this.
Jordan's gaze did not waver.
It stops, she said, when accountability begins.
And tonight, that begins with you.
Elena's face crumpled under the magnitude of her own undoing as the entire ballroom watched, aware that the countdown Jordan had spoken of was no longer metaphorical, it was unfolding in real time. The sound in the ballroom shifted again, not louder, not softer, but heavier, as if the very walls understood that what came next would determine the fate of more than just a $4 billion deal. Elena Whitford stood trembling, her breath shallow and uneven, while dozens of eyes watched her unravel in the same room where she had once been treated like royalty. Jordan Ellis remained steady, unmoved, the calm axis around which the entire night had begun to rotate. The contrast between them was stark, one woman drowning in her own arrogance exposed, the other rising with the quiet power she had earned through a lifetime of surviving rooms exactly like this. As Mariah reached the bottom of the stairs, she paused beside Jordan and tilted the tablet so only she could see it. A blue alert pulsed on the screen, signaling that the Whitford acquisition team upstairs had received formal notice of the audit review. The executives were already scrambling, and the ripple of their panic would be felt within minutes.
Phase 3 is awaiting your final cue, Mariah said softly.
Jordan nodded once, but she did not take her eyes off Elena. The heiress backed away until her shoulders nearly collided with a table covered in crystal centerpieces. Her voice, once loud and dripping with entitlement, came out small.
Please, you do not understand. My father will fix this. He will explain everything. Jordan's gaze did not soften. I understand perfectly. I understand that you looked at me tonight and decided I was beneath you. I understand that you used your family name as a weapon, expecting everyone around you to support whatever narrative you created. I understand that you believed humiliation is a form of entertainment.
A murmur of agreement rippled through the guests, many of whom had witnessed Elena's behavior countless times but never dared speak against her. Tonight, however, the tide had shifted, the balance of power was changing in real time. Jordan stepped closer, not aggressively, but with the steady, unshakable confidence of a woman who had spent her entire life being challenged and was no longer willing to make herself smaller for anyone's comfort. When you told Officer Dalton to remove me, Jordan said, you assumed I had no power here. But you did not realize that your family's entire negotiation rests on my approval. You were so certain I did not belong that you tried to erase me from a room built on my work. Elena's lip quivered, and a tear finally broke free, tracing down her cheek as guests silently looked on.
But Jordan's voice remained even. This is not about hurting you. This is about accountability. Something you have carefully avoided your entire life. Behind them, the doors to the mezzanine opened sharply.
3 members of the Whitford executive team hurried down the stairs, their expressions pale and frantic.
One of them, Chief Operating Officer Richard Penn, approached Elena with a strained voice. What did you do? He whispered, grabbing her lightly by the arms. The board is calling an emergency session. They are freezing the negotiation until the audit is complete. Your father is furious. He is saying he cannot reverse this. Elena shook her head wildly, her voice breaking.
No, she is lying.
She cannot do this. She is nobody.
Richard turned toward Jordan, his posture stiffening with the realization of exactly who he was addressing. Miss Ellis, he said, voice strained with respect forced by circumstance, there must be some compromise we can reach.
Jordan did not look away. There was, she answered.
3 hours ago, before your heiress decided to use me as her evening amusement. Richard closed his eyes, the weight of the situation sinking into his shoulders.
Is there anything we can do to stop Phase 3? Jordan finally broke her gaze from Elena and looked at him with absolute clarity.
You can start, she said, by acknowledging that what happened tonight was wrong. The room went silent again as dozens of witnesses turned their attention to the trembling heiress, waiting to see if she was capable of humility or if her pride would deliver the final blow to her family's empire. The silence that settled over the ballroom was not peaceful, it was charged, sharp, and expectant, like the air before a thunderstorm. Every guest, every server, every board member stood rooted in place, their eyes bouncing between Jordan Ellis and the trembling heiress who had finally run out of places to hide. Elena Whitford's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts as she looked around desperately, searching for someone, anyone, who would rescue her from the fallout she had created with her own arrogance. But no one moved. Even Richard Penn, the chief operating officer who had once spoken to her with unwavering deference, kept his distance now. Jordan's question lingered in the room like a held breath. You can start by acknowledging that what happened tonight was wrong. It was not a dramatic command, it was a simple truth, delivered without fury, without theatrics. And somehow, that made it even more devastating. Elena swallowed hard, her voice rasping as she attempted to respond. I did not mean, she stopped when she saw Jordan's expression. Calm. Steady. Expecting the truth rather than excuses. I did not know who you were, Elena said finally, her voice cracking. Jordan replied without hesitation. That is the problem. Your respect depends on whether or not you think someone is important. You believe you can measure a person's worth based on last names, clothing labels, or the circles they are allowed to enter. That is not ignorance. That is prejudice. A ripple of discomfort washed across the crowd. Several guests looked at the floor. A few nodded slowly, acknowledging what they had witnessed with their own eyes. The Whitford executives exchanged tense glances, knowing Jordan's words were now part of the unavoidable narrative forming in the room. Elena's voice trembled. I was not trying to be prejudiced. Her breath caught as she remembered her own words. The ones spoken too loudly, too proudly, too cruelly to deny. You people have to be. Nobody cares what you have to say. Escort her out. Each sentence replayed in her head like a damning echo, louder and louder with every passing second. Her knees wavered. She grabbed the back of a chair for balance. Jordan watched her silently, not with satisfaction, but with the kind of clarity that comes after years of fighting to be seen as fully human in rooms built to exclude her. Richard Penn stepped forward, speaking cautiously. Miss Whitford, the board is waiting for your statement. They are requesting your account of what happened here tonight. Elena's eyes widened with horror. My statement? I cannot tell them I did this. I cannot say I insulted the lead negotiator. They will destroy me. Jordan's voice remained calm. No, Miss Whitford. You destroyed yourself the moment you believed humiliation was a birthright. Elena opened her mouth to protest, but before she could speak, Jordan lifted her phone again. One tap. A soft chime. Mariah glanced down at her tablet, then nodded. Phase 3 has been initiated. A wave of whispers flooded the ballroom. One of the Whitford executives stepped forward sharply. What does that mean? What exactly did you trigger? Mariah's voice was clear and professional. Phase 3 includes suspension of the acquisition agreement, notification of all investors regarding misrepresentation during negotiations, and escalation to the legal review division. The words landed like falling stones. Richard Penn pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, "This is catastrophic." Elena shook her head violently. You cannot. Please, I am begging you. You cannot do this to my family. Jordan finally stepped closer, her expression unshakable. Miss Whitford, this is not about your family. This is about accountability for your actions. You took one look at me and decided I did not belong. Now you must face the consequences of that choice. A single tear slid down Elena's cheek as she whispered, You are ending everything. Jordan held her gaze. No. I am simply ending the lie that people like me do not belong in rooms like this. The chandelier above them flickered, and the entire ballroom seemed to brace itself for what would happen next. The chandelier flickered again, not because of any electrical fault, but because the atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted so drastically that even the light seemed to recoil from the tension. Every face, every breath, every heartbeat aligned toward one single point, the moment when Jordan Ellis would either show mercy or deliver the consequence she had warned about from the very beginning. Elena Whitford, once the center of attention in every room she entered, now stood diminished, hollowed out by the weight of her own behavior. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Please, Jordan, I am begging you.
I cannot undo what I said. But you do not have to end everything."
Jordan did not respond immediately. She let the silence do the work, the kind of silence that had followed her throughout her life, not chosen but endured, the kind that forced her to swallow humiliation rather than express it. Now, for the first time, that silence belonged to her.
It was agency. It was consequence. It was justice.
Mariah stepped closer, holding the tablet against her chest, her composure unwavering despite the chaos blooming around the room.
"Miss Ellis," she said softly, "the Legal Review Division has acknowledged receipt of the escalation. They are requesting verbal confirmation from you before proceeding to the next stage." The murmurs intensified.
A few guests took cautious steps back, as though they feared being too close to the blast radius of a corporate implosion.
Others leaned in, unable to look away.
Richard Penn cleared his throat and tried to regain control of the narrative. "Miss Ellis," he began, "I understand that you have every right to pursue this.
But before you confirm, I ask you to consider the broader implications. The press will learn about this. Investors will panic. The Whitford Corporation employs thousands of people.
A collapse of this scale will have consequences far beyond the individuals in this room." Jordan turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze with a calmness that carried authority, pain, and lived experience all at once.
"Do you believe I have not considered that?" she asked. "Do you believe I have not thought about the people who will be affected? I built my career on systems that were never designed to include people like me. I know exactly what responsibility looks like."
She stepped closer, her voice steady. "But responsibility does not mean allowing prejudice to go unchecked. It does not mean allowing the powerful to treat others as disposable and then hide behind the institutions they built. And it certainly does not mean protecting an empire that allows its heiress to humiliate someone for sport." Elena flinched at the word humiliate, the memory of her own cruelty now clearer and sharper than it had been when she believed herself untouchable. She sank into a nearby chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she whispered, "I never thought it would go this far.
I never thought there would be consequences." "That," Jordan said, "is the real problem." The guests did not applaud. They did not gasp. They simply watched, transfixed, as Jordan stepped into her authority with the quiet power that had always been hers but had never been acknowledged by rooms like this. Mariah held out the tablet again. "Miss Ellis," she prompted gently, "awaiting your confirmation." Jordan looked down at the screen, the blue-gold corporate interface reflecting in her eyes like a line between past and future. She did not press anything yet. Instead, she addressed the room, her voice carrying the weight of decades. "You all witnessed what happened tonight," she said. "You all heard the words, saw the actions, and felt the imbalance that has defined every space I have ever walked into." She paused, letting the silence settle once more. "Tonight is not about revenge. It is about ending a pattern." Elena choked out, "Please, Jordan, I am begging you. I will apologize. I will do it publicly. I will do anything you ask." Jordan studied her for a long, still moment, the weight of her decision pressing against the very air. The entire ballroom seemed to lean forward, bracing for the words that would change everything. The room seemed to bend around Jordan Ellis as she stood in the center of the ballroom, holding not just a tablet awaiting her confirmation, but the weight of every moment she had ever been dismissed, minimized, or erased. The chandeliers shimmered overhead, refracting light across polished marble as if the entire space had become a stage for a reckoning long overdue. Every guest watched with the stillness of people witnessing a verdict. Elena Whitford remained seated, trembling, her palms pressed flat against her knees as though grounding herself could somehow anchor her collapsing world. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Jordan, please. I am begging you. I did not mean it. I swear I did not mean it." Jordan turned her head slightly,
her expression unreadable. Intent is irrelevant when impact is this deep, she said softly.
You believed your status protected you from consequences. You believed your cruelty was harmless.
But the truth is, you carry your family's name as if it grants you license to demean anyone who does not fit the picture of what you believe power looks like. A murmur of agreement rippled across the room, and several guests shifted uncomfortably. Some were remembering past moments when they had laughed at Elena's jokes or dismissed her behavior as merely privileged brashness.
Tonight, they could no longer pretend it was harmless. Richard Penn stepped forward again, desperation edging into his voice. Miss Ellis, please reconsider the escalation.
The collapse of this deal would destroy years of work. It would trigger legal complications for everyone involved, not just the Whitfords.
Surely there must be another way. Jordan met his gaze calmly.
There was another way, she said.
It involved respect. It involved basic decency.
It involved treating me as a human being rather than an inconvenience in a room you assumed belonged to you. Her voice did not rise, but it sharpened, cutting through the air with surgical precision. And your heiress failed every single part of that. A woman near the silent auction table spoke up, her voice steady but emotional. I saw everything, she said. I saw how Miss Whitford spoke to her. I saw the way she treated her.
If there are no consequences, then this will happen again. And again. And again. More voices joined, quiet at first, then louder. She is right. You cannot keep protecting her.
This was not an accident. The shift was unmistakable, the room was no longer Elena's audience. It had become Jordan's witness.
Mariah raised the tablet once more. The review division is requesting confirmation within the next 2 minutes, she said. If no confirmation is given, the escalation lapses and all actions will be reversed. If confirmation is given, the suspension becomes permanent. The ticking clock hovered over them like an invisible countdown.
Elena's eyes filled with tears as she rose shakily to her feet. Jordan, she pleaded, I am sorry.
I am so sorry. I should not have spoken to you that way.
I should not have said any of it. I was angry, I was frustrated, Jordan lifted her hand gently, stopping her.
Do not rewrite what happened, she said. Do not turn your cruelty into a mistake of emotion. You were not angry.
You were comfortable.
The words hit Elena harder than anything Jordan had said before. The heiress sank back down, her face crumpling.
Please, she whispered, I cannot lose everything. Jordan looked at her for a long, quiet moment. It was impossible to read her expression, even the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the decision that would shape everything that followed.
Finally, Jordan inhaled slowly and
turned toward Mariah. The heiress's lips parted in a silent plea.
The guests leaned in.
The chandeliers shimmered like held stars. Jordan's voice broke the silence.
Mariah, she said, steady and clear, begin phase 4.
The room erupted, not with sound, but with a stunned, electric silence as everyone understood exactly what that meant. The moment Jordan Ellis said the words, begin phase 4, the ballroom seemed to inhale all at once, as if the chandeliers, the marble columns, the velvet curtains, and every single person inside the room understood that they had just crossed the threshold into a point of no return. Mariah tapped the command without hesitation, her fingers steady even as the gravity of the moment shifted the air around her. A soft tone emitted from the tablet, barely audible over the collective shock radiating throughout the room, but unmistakably final in its meaning.
Within seconds, the Whitford executives' phones began vibrating with cascading alerts.
Richard Penn looked down at his screen, his brows furrowing deeper with each notification.
This cannot be real, he murmured, scrolling as if hoping one message would contradict the rest. The acquisition is suspended. Investor Relations is requesting an emergency briefing. Legal Review has flagged the negotiation for potential misconduct. He raised his eyes to Jordan, disbelief etched across his face. You executed a full shutdown.
Jordan remained perfectly composed.
I executed accountability, she said calmly.
Something your organization has avoided for far too long.
Meanwhile, Elena Whitford looked like she had been hollowed out from the inside. Her knees buckled, and she lowered herself onto a chair, clutching the edges as though the world had begun tilting beneath her. Her voice quivered as she whispered, "Jordan, please, please undo this. I will lose everything. My father will never forgive me. My family's reputation." Jordan did not raise her voice, but the firmness in her tone cut through Elena's panic like a clean blade. "Your family's reputation was built on the assumption that people like me would stay silent. Tonight proves that silence is no longer guaranteed." A guest near the bar stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "I recorded everything," she said. "What Miss Whitford said. What she did. None of this is exaggerated. None of it is invented." Another guest added, "She humiliated her for no reason. There has to be accountability." The chorus of agreement grew louder. Some guests folded their arms, some nodded solemnly, some simply stared at Jordan with the dawning realization that they were witnessing something far larger than a corporate breakdown. They were watching a barrier crack, a hierarchy crumble. Elena shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "I can apologize," she pleaded. "I can make a statement. I can tell the truth. Please, Jordan, I will do anything you ask." Jordan stepped closer, her expression a mixture of resolve and sorrow, the look of someone who had carried the weight of similar moments her entire life. "An apology delivered under pressure is not integrity," she said. "It is desperation. And desperation cannot undo what your words revealed." Mariah glanced at her tablet again. "Miss Ellis," she said softly, "Phase 4 confirmation has been accepted. The suspension is now irreversible pending board override. Analysts and legal teams have already been notified." A jolt of panic shot through the Whitford executives. One muttered, "The board will tear us apart." Another whispered, "Her father is going to explode when he sees this." Jordan looked at them with calm clarity. "Your concern should not be the board, or investors, or the press. Your concern should be the culture you allow to flourish. This is the result." Elena's breath hitched. "Please," she choked, "I am begging you. Do not do this." Jordan stood tall, her voice steady and unyielding. "Miss Whitford, what I ended tonight was not your future. It was your impunity." The ballroom absorbed her words with reverence. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their light a little tighter, as though witnessing the closing chapter of a story that had been waiting years to be told. And as Elena's sobs broke the silence, every guest present understood that nothing about this night would ever be forgotten. The aftermath of Phase 4 rippled through the ballroom like a shockwave, unspooling every illusion of control the Whitford family had ever wrapped themselves in. Phones continued to buzz in the pockets of executives, board members, and senior partners, each vibration carrying another fragment of the empire's unraveling. It was not chaos, it was consequence, unfolding in real time under the glow of chandeliers that suddenly felt too bright, too exposed, too honest. Elena Whitford remained seated, her posture collapsed inward as though she were trying to fold herself into something smaller, something invisible. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably against the velvet cushion of the chair as her tears pooled and overflowed. The heiress who once dominated every room she entered now looked like a child lost in a place she once believed she owned. Jordan Ellis stood before her, composed, grounded, and impossibly steady, as though the room itself anchored around her presence. She took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle before speaking. "Miss Whitford," she said, her voice calm but unwavering, "what you are feeling right now is not destruction. It is consequence. For the first time in your life, you are standing in the debris of your own behavior." Elena shook her head weakly. "I did not know," she whispered. Jordan responded gently but firmly. "Ignorance is not innocence. You treated me as less because you assumed I was less. You relied on stereotypes that have followed people like me into every boardroom, every negotiation, every interview. Tonight, for the first time, those assumptions cost you something." Several guests shifted uncomfortably, shame flickering across their faces as they recognized how many times they had stood silent while similar moments played out in other rooms, at other events, directed at other people who did not have the authority to fight back. Richard Penn approached cautiously,
stopping a respectful distance away from Jordan. "Miss Ellis," he began, his tone deferential now, stripped of the corporate edge he once wielded like a shield, "the board is requesting your statement regarding the escalation. They are preparing for an emergency midnight session and would like to hear your account of the incident before they proceed." Jordan nodded once. "They will have it," she said. "And it will be factual." Richard swallowed hard, understanding the full implications of those words. Factual meant devastating. Factual meant undeniable. Factual meant the empire was officially in freefall. Behind him, several executives were already making frantic phone calls, their hushed voices layered with panic. "Suspend all further negotiations. Notify external counsel. Inform the press office. No, do not release a statement yet." In the middle of it all, Jordan remained centered. She looked down at Elena one more time, her tone steady. "I gave you a chance to walk away from what you started. But you chose to escalate. You grabbed the match, struck it, and threw it into a room full of gasoline. Tonight is simply the fire that followed." Elena covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking. "I will apologize," she muttered through her fingers. "I will do it publicly. I will tell everyone the truth about what I did." Jordan did not react with triumph or satisfaction. Instead, she spoke with the calm authority of someone who had fought for her dignity her entire life. "A public apology is necessary," Jordan said. "But do not confuse it with redemption. Redemption requires change. Consistent change. Not theatrics." Mariah approached, her tablet glowing softly in her hands. "Miss Ellis," she said, "the Legal Review Division is requesting a direct statement from you within the next 20 minutes. They want to finalize the documentation for the board session." Jordan nodded. "Prepare it," she replied, then turned back to Elena with a final, steady resolve. "Your father will hear all of this before the night is over. And when he does, he will not be angry because you embarrassed him. He will be angry because you exposed the truth he spent years hiding beneath polished branding." The words struck like a bell, echoing through a room filled with suspended breaths. Elena lowered her hand slowly, eyes red and swollen, and whispered the only truth she could muster. "I never thought someone like you could end everything." Jordan held her gaze without flinching. "That is because you never believed someone like me had the power to." And the ballroom, for the first time all evening, understood exactly how wrong the heiress had been. The ballroom seemed to pulse with a strange, electric stillness, as if the very architecture was aware that it had become the witness to a reckoning no one present would ever forget. Jordan Ellis stood tall and composed, while Elena Whitford trembled in the chair that now felt more like a confession bench than a place of privilege. Executives scrambled around the edges of the room, whispering into phones, gesturing in frantic circles, their once confident voices cracked by panic and disbelief. Yet despite the chaos beneath the surface, the center of the room remained anchored in the quiet power of one woman who had refused to shrink. Mariah stepped closer and handed Jordan the tablet with the draft statement prepared for the Legal Review Division. "Everything is ready for your approval," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tension saturating the air. "Once submitted, the board will use this as the foundation of their midnight session. It will become part of the permanent record." Jordan glanced down, scanning the lines with a slow, deliberate calm. The facts were clear, concise, and irrefutable. Every disrespectful word spoken by Elena, every gesture meant to humiliate, every decision that escalated the situation rather than de-escalating it, had been captured with precision. And the consequences that followed were not vengeance, they were process, set into motion by the system itself once the truth was brought into the light. For a brief moment, Jordan's gaze lifted from the tablet and drifted toward the towering window overlooking the city skyline. She remembered the younger version of herself who once stood outside similar buildings, told she did not belong, told she did not fit the picture, told she needed to earn a place in rooms that were never designed for her. Tonight was not just for her. It was for every person who had ever been diminished by prejudice that hid behind polite smiles and polished etiquette. When she turned back, her expression remained composed. "Mariah," she said quietly, "send it." Elena let out a soft, broken sound, a sob she tried and failed to swallow. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Jordan, I am begging you.
Please do not do this. I will do anything.
I will apologize, I will make a statement, I will take responsibility, I will." Jordan held up her hand gently, not in anger but in finality.
Miss Whitford, this is no longer about you and me. This is about the culture your family allowed to thrive.
This is about every time someone was dismissed, overlooked, or humiliated because they did not look like they belonged in your world.
Tonight is the moment the pattern breaks.
The statement transmitted the instant Mariah pressed the final confirmation. A soft chime echoed from her tablet, and within seconds the executives' phones lit up again with a new flood of alerts. Statement received.
Board session confirmed. Action locked.
Irreversible. Richard Penn exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face as the reality sank fully into his bones. "The board will have no choice," he murmured. "They will strip the Whitford family of negotiation rights. They will suspend her from any leadership consideration. They will make an example out of this." A wave of realization passed through the room as dozens of guests absorbed
what that meant.
Elena sagged back into the chair, covering her mouth as another sob escaped. "I never thought," she whispered, "that you could take everything from me." Jordan stepped forward, her voice calm and unwavering.
"I did not take anything from you. I simply refused to let you take anything from me."
The room fell into reverent silence, the weight of the truth settling over every guest like a final, undeniable verdict. The ballroom did not return to normal, it evolved into something quieter, sharper, and far more honest. The chandeliers still glowed, but their light felt different now, as though they were illuminating not wealth, not prestige, but truth. Guests lingered where they stood, their expressions a collage of shock, reflection, and a dawning understanding that they had just witnessed the end of an era built on entitlement. Jordan Ellis remained at the center of it all, her presence steady and composed, the embodiment of a woman who had fought too long, endured too much, and finally reached a moment she had been denied her entire life, the moment when her dignity was not questioned but recognized. Across from her, Elena Whitford sat slumped in the velvet chair, her posture collapsed in defeat. Her tears streaked silently down her cheeks, not just from humiliation but from the crushing realization that the world she had moved through effortlessly had finally stopped cushioning her from consequences. Her voice came out small, barely a whisper.
"Jordan, what happens now?"
Jordan looked at her, not with cruelty, but with the calm truth of someone who had carried the weight of injustice far too often. "What happens now," she said, "is that accountability takes its place. What happens now is that the system you depended on to protect you will look at your actions instead of your last name. What happens now is that the consequences you avoided all your life have finally caught up." Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears she could no longer control. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she whispered. "I was careless. Jordan's voice cut gently through the air. "You were comfortable. Comfort without empathy becomes cruelty. Tonight was not an accident. It was a reflection of who you believed yourself to be and who you believed I was." A hushed stillness settled again as Jordan turned slightly, addressing not just Elena, but the room. "For years, people like me have walked into spaces where our worth was questioned before we even spoke. We have endured microaggressions disguised as jokes, disrespect disguised as etiquette, exclusion disguised as tradition. But tonight proves something important." She paused, letting her words settle into the fabric of the moment.
"Power is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is patient.
And sometimes it stands in the middle of a ballroom and refuses to shrink." A quiet murmur of agreement swept through the guests, some nodded, some looked away in shame, and some looked at Jordan with newfound respect. A board member approached cautiously, hands folded in front of him.
"Miss Ellis," he said gently, "the midnight session is confirmed. Your statement is the foundation of the board's action.
The Whitford family will face a full review at dawn."
Jordan nodded once.
"Good," she said.
"The truth belongs in the light." Elena looked up again, her face streaked with tears.
"Jordan," she whispered, "I am sorry.
I truly am.
I know it does not fix anything, but I am sorry." Jordan studied her, her expression neither cold nor forgiving, but grounded in something deeper. "Apologies have value when they come with change," she said.
"If you want redemption, earn it."
"Not for me, but for the people who will cross your path after tonight." The words struck gently but firmly, like the closing of a chapter. Mariah stepped forward, her voice soft.
"Your car is waiting, Miss Ellis." Jordan offered a final nod.
She turned away from Elena and the shattered remnants of the Whitford Empire, walking through the parted crowd with the quiet authority of someone who had reclaimed something far greater than a corporate victory. She had reclaimed her narrative. As she approached the exit, guests stepped aside respectfully. Some whispered her name with reverence, others looked at her as though witnessing history. And just before she reached the doors, she paused and spoke one final sentence that echoed across the ballroom with the force of truth delivered without apology. "I did not raise my voice tonight. I raised the standard." Then she stepped into the night, leaving behind a room that would never forget the moment dignity rose higher than power, and justice walked out the door wearing a calm, unshakable grace.